I'm Isabella, 32 years old, a surgeon who has spent years building a life I'm proud of. But on one Tuesday morning, a single text shattered everything. My phone buzzed, and there it was from my mother: "We need space. Don't reach out." My sister even liked the message as if it were just some casual post. What cut even deeper was what came right after. I saw photos they posted, the whole family gathered celebrating my mother's birthday without a single invitation for me. A warm family moment turned into a silent announcement that I no longer belonged. My stomach twisted. I had poured everything into my family, money, time, hope, only to be discarded like this. I stared at the screen, their words searing into me. Then I typed back, "Understood." By midnight, I had made my move. The family trust I had managed for years, frozen. My contributions to their retirement fund withdrawn. The property taxes they'd leaned on me to cover back on their shoulders. I didn't hesitate, didn't second guess. At 4:25 a.m., my phone lit up, 36 missed calls, voicemails flooding in, their panic echoing even through the silence of my notifications. They thought they could push me out, but I wasn't playing their game anymore. What they didn't know was why I'd done it or what was coming next. I had always been the one holding things together, but that text wasn't just a message, it was a line drawn in the sand. They wanted space, I'd give them more than they ever bargained for. Stay with me. This is only the beginning. Have you ever been excluded from an important family moment? How did it change you? Share your story. It might resonate with someone who needs to hear it. Growing up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, my family looked perfect from the outside. Charles, my father, was a big-shot real estate investor, always closing deals and flashing his success at country club dinners. My mother, Carol, thrived on organizing charity galas and social events, her name a fixture in local society pages. Then there was my sister Stephanie, 3 years older than me at 35, who never held a steady job. She lived off my parents, drifting through life with their full support. Me, I was the afterthought, the one who made it as a surgeon, but somehow never measured up in their eyes. I didn't grow up wanting for much. Cherry Hill was all manicured lawns, gated communities, and private schools. My father's investments kept us comfortable: private tutors, summer camps, vacations to Europe. But beneath the polished surface, there was a divide. Stephanie was their golden child, the one they doted on. If she wanted a new car, my father would write a check without blinking. If she racked up credit card debt on designer clothes, my mother would laugh it off as finding herself. I, on the other hand, was expected to fend for myself. I worked summers to pay for college textbooks while Stephanie got a monthly allowance, no questions asked. By the time I finished medical school, I was earning more than enough to stand on my own. But instead of celebrating, my parents leaned on me harder. They didn't ask outright, at least not at first. It started with small things. "Isabella, can you cover the property taxes for the Jersey Shore house?" my mother would say, her tone light but expectant. "It's just temporary." Temporary turned into permanent. I paid for the upkeep of that sprawling vacation home, 6 bedrooms, ocean views, a pool nobody used half the time. I covered their utility bills when my father's deals went south. I even wired Stephanie money for her emergencies, which were usually just impulsive trips or new handbags. I told myself it was my role. I was the successful one, the surgeon with a 6-figure income. If I could keep the family afloat, maybe they'd see me the way they saw Stephanie. Maybe my father would stop brushing off my achievements with a curt, "That's nice, Isabella." Maybe my mother would stop fawning over Stephanie's half-baked ideas while ignoring my long hours at the hospital. I poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into their lives, 300,000 for the Jersey Shore house, alone another 50,000 a year for Stephanie's expenses. I thought it would bridge the gap, make us a real family, but it didn't. Every family dinner, I felt like an outsider in my own home. My mother would gush about Stephanie's latest whim, a cooking class. She never finished a yoga retreat she abandoned after a week. My father would nod along, his attention fixed on her. If I mentioned a tough case I'd handled at work, a 12-hour surgery that saved a patient, they'd change the subject. Stephanie's thinking of starting a blog, my mother once said, cutting me off mid-sentence. A blog? As if that compared to rebuilding someone's spine. I tried to brush it off to focus on my work, but the loneliness crept in. I'd come home from a night shift exhausted and see photos of my parents and Stephanie at some gala or brunch, all smiles, no mention of me. I'd scroll through my mother's social media posts about Stephanie's adventures, never a word about my career. I kept writing checks, hoping one day they'd notice. "You're so responsible, Isabella," my mother would say, but it wasn't pride in her voice, it was expectation. Stephanie, meanwhile, could do no wrong. She'd crash my father's car and he'd laugh it off. She'd overspend, and my mother would call it living her truth. I started questioning things. Why was I the one keeping the lights on while Stephanie got the applause? Why did my parents act like my success was a given, but her every move was a miracle? I didn't have answers, but the weight of it all was suffocating. I'd lie awake at night wondering if I was the problem. Maybe if I gave more, did more, they'd finally see me. I clung to that hope even as it slipped through my fingers. Looking back, I see how naive I was. I thought money could buy their love, their respect, but all it did was make me invisible. I was their bank, not their daughter. And that realization was just the beginning. Everything shifted when Julie, a colleague, said something I didn't want to hear. Julie Walsh, a nurse at the hospital where I work, had always been sharp, noticing things others missed. We weren't close, just co-workers who shared the occasional coffee break, but she had a knack for cutting through the noise. One afternoon, as we scrubbed out after a long surgery, she looked at me and said, "Isabella, your family's leaning on you too hard. You're carrying their whole life." I laughed it off, rolling my eyes. She didn't know my family, how could she? But her words stuck, nagging at me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. Managing the family's finances had become my second job. Beyond my surgeries, I handled the accounts for our Jersey Shore vacation home property taxes, maintenance, insurance, all of it. That house wasn't cheap. $60,000 a year just to keep it standing, not counting repairs. I also covered Stephanie's expenses, rent for her apartment, phone bills, car payments. She never asked directly, but my mother would call, her voice soft and practiced. "Stephanie's struggling, Isabella. Can you help out?" I'd wire the money, no questions asked, because that's what family does, right? I told myself it was my duty, the price of being the successful one. Julie saw it differently. We were grabbing lunch in the hospital cafeteria a few days later, and she brought it up again. "You're paying for their entire lifestyle," she said, pointing her fork at me. "Your sister doesn't even work. Why are you the one footing the bill?" I bristled. "It's not like that," I snapped. "They need me. I'm just helping out." Julie raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Still, her words echoed. I didn't want to admit it, but I knew she wasn't entirely wrong. The truth was, I'd been managing the family trust since my early 20s. My father had handed it over after one of his deals went bad, saying I was better with numbers. It wasn't a compliment. It was a burden. I balanced the books, paid the bills, and made sure everyone stayed comfortable. Meanwhile, Stephanie floated through life, no job, no responsibilities. She'd call my mother to complain about a late phone bill, and my mother would call me. "Can you take care of it?" "Isabella," Mom would say, her tone implying I owed it to them. I never said no. But Julie's comment made me start looking closer. I noticed things I'd brushed off before. My parents never asked Stephanie to contribute, even though she was 35, perfectly capable of working. They'd praise her for the smallest things, a new hobby, a weekend trip, while my 12-hour shifts at the hospital barely got a nod. Once I mentioned a complex surgery I'd led, saving a patient after a car accident. My father's response: "That's great, Isabella. By the way, Stephanie's thinking of taking a photography class. A photography class. As if that matched what I did. I started tallying it up. Last year alone, I'd spent $75,000 on Stephanie's expenses. Her rent, her car, her credit card bills. The Jersey Shore house was another $60,000 plus $20,000 for my parents' utility bills and club memberships. I wasn't just helping. I was bankrolling their entire world. And what did I get? A pat on the head if I was lucky. More often, it was silence or a quick change of subject. I tried to push Julie's words away. It's family, I told myself. They'd do the same for me. But would they? I remembered a time when I needed help. My car broke down during residency, and I was strapped for cash. I asked my father for a loan, just a few $1,000s. He hesitated, said he'd check his accounts. Stephanie got a new car that same month, no questions asked. The memory stung, but I'd buried it, told myself it didn't matter. Julie didn't let up. During a late shift, she caught me in the break room, exhausted after a 10-hour surgery. "Isabella, you're killing yourself for them," she said. "They're not even grateful." I wanted to argue to defend my family, but I couldn't. Deep down, I knew she was right. Stephanie's carefree life, my parents' endless support for her, it wasn't fair. Why was I the one holding everything together while she got a free ride? That night, I went home and pulled up the family accounts. The numbers stared back at me, $155,000 last year, all from my pocket. I thought about Stephanie living rent-free, no job, no worries, while I worked myself to the bone. I thought about my parents, always ready to praise her, but never me. For the first time, I let myself feel the weight of it, the unfairness, the resentment. I wasn't ready to act, not yet, but Julie's words had cracked something open. I couldn't unsee it. Tensions exploded during a family dinner last summer. It was one of those rare evenings when I wasn't on call at the hospital, so I drove to my parents' house in Cherry Hill, expecting a chance to connect. Instead, I walked into a storm. My father had just bought a new Mercedes, $45,000, fully loaded, parked in the driveway like a trophy. My mother was showing off blueprints for a home renovation, a $70,000 project to redo the kitchen and add a sunroom. They'd been spending like money grew on trees, but I knew better. Their accounts were stretched thin, and I'd been quietly covering the gaps. Dinner started civilly enough. We sat around the mahogany table, my mother's favorite crystal wine glasses gleaming under the chandelier. Stephanie was there, scrolling on her phone, barely engaged. Then my father cleared his throat. "Isabella, we need to talk about the house," he said, his tone serious. "The renovation's going to cost more than we thought. Can you chip in another $20,000? I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. $20,000 on top of the $60,000 I already paid yearly for the Jersey Shore house, not to mention their other expenses. Before I could respond, my mother chimed in. "It's for the family, Isabella. You're doing so well at the hospital." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Dad, Mom, I'm already covering a lot," I said. "The vacation home, Stephanie's bills, your club memberships. I can't keep adding more." My father's face hardened. "We're not asking for much," he said. "You're a surgeon. You can afford it." Stephanie looked up from her phone, smirking. "Yeah, Isabella, it's just $20,000. What's the big deal?" That's when Stephanie dropped her bombshell. "Speaking of money," she said, leaning forward, "I've got this amazing idea for a boutique. High-end fashion, exclusive brands. I need you to invest, say, $50,000 to start." I stared at her, stunned. A boutique Stephanie, who'd never held a job longer than 6 months, who'd flunked out of a business course in college, thought she could run a store. "Stephanie, that's a huge risk," I said, choosing my words carefully. "You don't have any experience in retail. It's not a good idea." Her face flushed. "You don't believe in me," she snapped. "I've been researching this for weeks. I know what I'm doing." I shook my head. "It's not about belief. It's about numbers. Most boutiques fail in the first year. I can't throw $50,000 at something with no plan." Stephanie crossed her arms, glaring. "You're so selfish, Isabella. You just want to control everything." That's when my parents jumped in. My mother's voice was sharp. "Isabella, why can't you support your sister? She's trying to build something." My father nodded. "Stephanie's got vision. You're too focused on your job to see it." I felt my chest tighten. "My job pays for this family," I said, my voice rising. "I'm not a bank. I can't fund every whim." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Don't talk to us like that," he said. "Stephanie's trying to make something of herself. You could learn from her." I was floored. Learn from her? Stephanie, who lived rent-free, who'd never paid a bill on time, was their shining star. I'd spent years keeping their finances afloat, hundreds of thousands of dollars, countless hours balancing their accounts. Yet here they were defending her half-baked idea while dismissing me. "I'm not funding the boutique," I said firmly. "It's too risky, and Stephanie's not ready." My mother gasped. "How dare you talk about your sister like that?" she said. "You've always been jealous of her." Jealous. The word hit like a slap. I'd been the one grinding through medical school, working 80-hour weeks while Stephanie partied and spent my money. But in their eyes, I was the problem. Stephanie smirked again, leaning back in her chair. "You're just mad because I'm creative," she said. "Not everyone wants to be a boring doctor." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. "I'm not boring," I said. "I'm realistic. Someone has to be." The rest of the dinner was a blur. My parents kept defending Stephanie, praising her ambition while criticizing my attitude. Every time I tried to explain about the risks, about the money I was already spending, they cut me off. "You're too rigid," my mother said. "You don't understand family." My father added, "We raised you better than this." By the time dessert was served, I felt like I was disappearing. They talked around me, planning Stephanie's boutique as if I hadn't spoken. I left that night feeling more alone than ever. Driving back to my apartment, I replayed the conversation in my head. My parents' words stung, but Stephanie's smirk burned deeper. They didn't see me, not my sacrifices, not my work, nothing. I'd been pouring my life into theirs, and all I got was blame. For the first time, I wondered if they'd ever change. That dinner wasn't just a fight, it was a wake-up call. I wasn't sure what to do next, but I knew something had to give. 2 weeks later, I was sipping coffee in my apartment, scrolling through emails when my phone buzzed. It was from my mother. "We need space. Don't reach out." The words hit like a punch. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. Before I could process it, I saw Stephanie had liked the message. My sister liking a text that cut me out of our family. It wasn't just a message, it was a betrayal, plain and simple. I tried to make sense of it. After that disastrous family dinner, I'd kept my distance, hoping things would cool off. But this was deliberate. I opened my mother's social media, something I rarely did, and there it was, photos from her birthday party posted the night before. A lavish event at a Cherry Hill Country Club, catered food, live music, Stephanie grinning next to her. My father was in the background, toasting with a glass of wine. I hadn't been invited. Not a call, not a text, nothing. They'd planned it, celebrated, and left me out entirely. The hurt was raw, sharper than I expected. I'd spent years funding their lives, yet they could erase me so easily. I needed to talk to someone, so I called Julie. We met at a coffee shop near the hospital, and I poured it all out, the text, the party, the way it made me feel invisible. Julie listened, her face softening. "Isabella, they're pushing you away because you're not giving them what they want anymore," she said. "You said no at that dinner. They don't like it." Her words stung, but they rang true. I'd set a boundary, and this was their response. Julie suggested I see someone professional, someone who could help me sort through the mess. That's how I ended up in Dr. Pamela King's office. Dr. King, a therapist with a calm voice and sharp insights, didn't sugarcoat things. In our first session, I showed her the text and told her about the party. "This isn't just about space," she said. "Your family's built a dynamic where you're the provider, not a person. They're punishing you for stepping out of that role." I sat there stunned. Provider, not a person. It was like she'd held up a mirror to my life. Dr. King asked about my role in the family. I explained how I'd been covering their expenses hundreds of thousands over the years, from the Jersey Shore house to Stephanie's rent. I told her how my parents always praised Stephanie, how they dismissed my work. She nodded, jotting notes. "You're in a pattern," she said. "You give, they take, and when you don't, they push you out. It's not healthy." I wanted to argue, to say they were just struggling, but the evidence was staring me in the face. That text, that party. They didn't want me. They wanted my money. Over the next session, Dr. King helped me see the bigger picture. My parents and Stephanie relied on me to keep their lifestyle intact, but they offered nothing in return. Not love, not respect. "You've been trying to earn their approval," Dr. King said. "But you can't buy it. And you don't need it." Her words hit hard. I'd spent years thinking if I gave enough, they'd value me. But they didn't. The birthday party was proof they could celebrate without me, but they couldn't pay their bills without me. I told Julie about the sessions, and she was blunt. "They're using you, Isabella," she said over coffee. "You deserve better." I knew she was right. But it was Dr. King who gave me the tools to act. She talked about boundaries, not just saying no, but enforcing it. "You can't change them," she said, "but you can change how you respond." I left her office feeling something new resolve. That text wasn't just a rejection, it was a chance to take back my life. I went home and reread the message. "We need space. Don't reach out." Fine, I thought. They wanted space, I'd give it to them, but not in the way they expected. For the first time, I saw a path forward, one where I wasn't their ATM, their doormat. By midnight, I'd finalized all the financial changes. After weeks of wrestling with my decision, I was done being the family's bank. The text from my mother and the birthday party snub were the last straws. I wasn't just setting boundaries, I was taking back control. I sat at my desk, laptop open, and made the calls that would change everything. First, I contacted Stephen Reed, a financial advisor recommended by a colleague. Stephen's sharp and no-nonsense walked me through the family trust. "You've been funding it alone for years," he said, reviewing the accounts. "It's time to protect yourself." On his advice, I froze the trust, locking access to the funds. I transferred its management to a professional firm, ensuring no one could touch it without oversight. It wasn't easy. Those accounts held over $1 million, most of it my contributions, but it was necessary. Next, I tackled the Jersey Shore house. I'd been paying $60,000 a year for its upkeep, but I was done. I called Christine Gray, a lawyer specializing in real estate. Christine, calm and methodical, confirmed my share of the property was legally mine. "You can sell it without their consent," she said. I listed my portion for sale through a realtor, expecting to net around $200,000. Every step was airtight. Stephen and Christine made sure of it. I wasn't just acting on impulse. I was doing this right. Finally, I stopped all transfers to my family. No more rent payments for Stephanie, no more utility bills for my parents, no more covering their country club fees. I canceled the automatic withdrawals, cutting off the pipeline I'd kept open for years. It felt like ripping off a bandage, painful but liberating. By midnight, I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but resolute. I'd done it. The fallout came fast. At 4:25 a.m. the next morning, my phone was blowing up. My father called 16 times, my mother 12, Stephanie, 836 calls in total, each one angrier than the last. I let them go to voicemail. My father's messages were sharp. "Isabella, what the hell are you doing? Fix this now." My mother's were softer but manipulative. "How could you do this to us, Isabella? We're family." Stephanie's were pure venom. "You're so selfish. You're ruining our lives." I didn't respond. I'd heard enough at that dinner last summer. Then came the texts. My mother sent a long one. "You're abandoning us. We trusted you with the family's finances, and this is how you repay us." My father's was shorter. "Call me back or you'll regret this." Stephanie's were relentless. A barrage of accusations. "You're jealous because I'm living my truth." You're just a cold, controlling doctor. I stared at my phone, each message a knife twist. But I didn't waver. Dr. King's words echoed in my head. I couldn't change them, only how I responded. The worst came when Stephanie took it public. I opened my social media to find her post dripping with spite. Some people think they're better than their family because they make money. Don't be fooled by my sister's success. She's heartless. It had dozens of likes, mostly from her friends, and a few comments piling on. Wow, that's low. What a betrayal. My stomach churned. I'd spent years supporting her, paying her rent, her bills $75,000 last year alone, and now I was the villain. The post spread, and I saw it shared by people I didn't even know. I called Christine again, worried about the legal fallout. Her post is nasty, but it's not defamation, Christine said. It's just family drama on public display. Stay focused. Stephen agreed, urging me to ignore the noise. They're panicking because they're losing control, he said. Keep moving forward. Their calm advice grounded me. I wasn't backing down. The calls and texts kept coming, a mix of rage and desperation. My mother's tone shifted to pleading. Isabella, we can't afford the house without you. Please, let's talk. My father tried guilt. You're breaking your mother's heart, Isabella. Stephanie's messages stayed vicious, accusing me of sabotaging her dreams. I didn't answer. Their reaction only proved what Dr. King had said. They saw me as a resource, not a daughter. By the end of the week, I felt the weight of their anger, but also a strange clarity. Stephanie's post, their frantic calls, it all showed how much they'd relied on me and how little they valued me. I wasn't just fighting for my money, I was fighting for myself. It wasn't over, but I'd taken the first real step. A month later, my family started feeling the consequences. I'd cut off their financial lifeline, and the ripple effects were undeniable. My phone stayed quiet for the first few days after I froze the trust and sold my share of the Jersey Shore house, but the silence didn't last. Their world was unraveling, and I was no longer there to hold it together. My father and mother made the first move. They sold the remaining share of the Jersey Shore house to cover their mounting debts. The property, once their pride and joy, fetched $300,000, but most of it went to creditors. I heard about it through a mutual friend who saw the listing go down. My father had always boasted about that house, a symbol of their status in Cherry Hill, but now it was gone. They also slashed their spending. No more country club memberships, no more weekend trips to Manhattan, no more lavish dinners. My mother's social media, once filled with photos of luxury, went quiet. It was a stark shift, one I hadn't anticipated so soon. Stephanie faced her own reckoning. Without my money covering her rent and bills, she had to stand on her own. A contact in town told me she'd taken a job as a sales associate at a local clothing store. Stephanie, who'd scoffed at ordinary work, was now ringing up purchases and folding sweaters. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. For the first time in years, she wasn't leaning on my parents or me. I felt a flicker of respect for her effort, but it didn't erase the hurt of her betrayal. The messages started a week after the sale. My mother sent the first one, her tone desperate. Isabella, we're struggling. Can we talk? We need your help. I read it, my heart heavy, but I didn't reply. My father's message came next, sharper. You're tearing this family apart. Call me back. Stephanie's was a mix of guilt and venom. I got a job, Isabella. Happy now. You've ruined everything. I stared at their words, each one trying to pull me back into their orbit. But I'd made my choice. Meeting them now would only reopen old wounds. They didn't stop. My father's calls came daily, sometimes twice, his voicemails alternating between pleas and threats. We raised you, Isabella, he said in one. You owe us. Don't make this worse. My mother's texts grew more frantic. Please, Isabella, we're losing everything. Just come to the house. Stephanie sent a single biting message. You're heartless. I'm working now, and you're still punishing us. I didn't respond to any of them. Their words stung, but I remembered how they'd excluded me, how they'd valued my money over me. I stayed firm even when the pressure mounted. My father's threats turned legal. "I'll sue you for mismanaging the trust," he texted. I wasn't worried. Christine had ensured every step was above board. Still, the hostility was exhausting. I'd see their names flash on my phone and feel a knot in my stomach. But I didn't waver. I'd spent years carrying their burdens and I was done. Stephanie's job was the biggest surprise. I'd always seen her as the spoiled one, the sister who'd never grow up. Yet there she was, working 40 hours a week, paying her own rent. A part of me wondered if this could have happened sooner if I hadn't enabled her for so long. But that thought passed quickly. Her social media post calling me heartless still lingered in my mind. She might be working, but she hadn't changed. My parents' lifestyle collapse was harder to watch. They'd built their identity on wealth, fancy cars, big houses, social status. Without my support, that facade crumbled. A neighbor mentioned they'd traded the Mercedes for a used sedan, a practical choice they'd never have made before. I didn't feel joy at their struggle, but I didn't feel guilt either. They'd made their choices just as I'd made mine. The barrage of messages continued for weeks. Some were soft like my mother's. "Isabella, we miss you. Let's fix this." Others were harsh like my father's. "You're no daughter of mine if you keep this up." I read them, saved them, but didn't answer. Meeting them would mean stepping back into their chaos, and I wasn't ready for that. I'd fought too hard to reclaim my life. By the end of the month, I felt a strange calm. Their world had shifted, and so had mine. I wasn't their bank anymore, and they were learning to live with it. The distance between us was wider than ever, but it was a distance I needed. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew I'd face it on my own terms. 3 months later, I felt true freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of my family's demands. I hadn't spoken to them since their last desperate messages, and the silence was liberating. My life was my own, and I was building it on my terms. My father and mother were struggling in Cherry Hill. Without my financial support, their lavish lifestyle collapsed completely. A colleague who knew them mentioned they'd moved into a smaller condo, a far cry from their sprawling house. Their social circle, once the envy of the neighborhood, had dwindled. The country club invitations stopped, and their names no longer appeared in local event photos. My father, who'd thrived on his reputation as a successful investor, was now just another retiree scraping by. My mother's event planning business had dried up. No one wanted to hire someone who couldn't afford her own parties. It wasn't easy to hear, but I didn't feel responsible anymore. Stephanie, surprisingly, was doing better. She'd settled into her sales job at the clothing store, earning enough to cover her rent and bills. A mutual acquaintance said she seemed focused, even proud of her work. I was glad she was standing on her own, but it didn't change what she'd done. Her social media post calling me heartless still stung. We hadn't spoken, and I had no plans to reach out. Some bridges stay burned. My own life was taking shape in ways I hadn't expected. At the hospital, I threw myself into my work as a surgeon. I took on new research projects, mentored younger doctors, and even started teaching a class at the medical school. Outside of work, I built a routine that was mine alone: morning runs, quiet dinners with friends, weekends exploring new hobbies. I wasn't lonely. I was whole. The money I'd once poured into my family now went to my own future savings investments, a small apartment I loved. For the first time, I wasn't living for anyone else's approval. Looking back, I saw the lesson clearly. Setting boundaries wasn't just about saying no. It was about protecting my worth. I'd spent years trying to earn my family's love with money, thinking it would make them see me. But they never did, not really. Cutting them off was painful, but it showed me I didn't need their validation to be enough. I was enough on my own. I learned something else too. You can't change people who don't want to change. My father and mother clung to their old ways until they had no choice but to adapt. Stephanie took steps forward, but our relationship was too broken to mend. I didn't hate them, I just chose myself. And that choice brought peace. If you've ever had to set boundaries with family, you know how hard it is. It's a fight to put yourself first, especially when guilt pulls you back. But it's worth it. I'd love to hear your stories. How did you set boundaries? What did you learn? Share them with me. Your experience might help someone else find their own freedom.